The afterlife. The unknown. Do spirits really exist? If these are questions that you've pondered from time to time, chances are you might get something out of Winchester, directed by Michael and Peter Spierig, who directed last year's Jigsaw. The Spierig brothers, two good Aussie boys I have to say, did a pretty decent job with their take on the Saw franchise, considering most of the Saw sequels aren't really much to look at. Here they get a chance to delve into the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California, which is meant to be one of the most haunted houses in North America, where Sarah Winchester, the widow of firearm magnate William Winchester, continually builds up the mansion to house the ghosts of those killed with Winchester rifles. If you're someone who knows of the mansion, or have maybe even visited the place, I think this film will be of some interest to you. At its roots, this is a haunted house movie, where ghosts live in the house, possessing people from time to time, and just generally making things go bump in the night. But surprisingly, the movie offers a little bit of insight into the Winchester curse, where Sarah Winchester, played here by the wonderful Helen Mirren, had sought help from a medium to connect with the spirits in the house, to try and help them to move on. Whether you believe any of this sort of stuff is entirely up to you. But for the sake of a horror film, it's just fun to go along for the ride. But if you do believe, this might get you thinking. This movie actually spends a good portion of the runtime talking about communicating with spirits, dealing and coming to peace with death and grief, as well as debating if Sarah Winchester was loopy or not. Jason Clarke stars as Eric Price, the doctor brought in by the Winchester company to diagnose whether the widow is still fit to be in charge of the company. The movie lives on the performances of Helen Mirren and Jason Clarke. They do a lot with what they're given, and the two of them, as you'd probably expect, especially Helen Mirren, are outstanding. Anytime the two are on the screen together, you get sucked into the mystery of the house, as Eric is trying to figure out whether Sarah is crazy, while also trying to come to terms with some of his own personal demons. Every piece of dialogue that comes from these two actors makes you really become more interested and invested in the story that they're telling, and really makes you curious when they do come across any ghosts in the house. Unfortunately, everything else around these two actors just isn't as interesting. There are some fun scares to be had, there are a couple that are kind of cheap and more in it for the audience, but most of the jump scares actually happen a bit earlier on in the film. As I was saying earlier, most of the film is more focused on the Winchesters and the mystery of the house. This film has trouble deciding whether it wants to be a fun popcorn horror flick like The Conjuring, or if it wants to be more focused on the mystery side of things. The movie really gets going when Jason and Helen meet in the film. Before that, it's pretty basic horror film setup of something bad happens in the house. Oh, better call the skeptic to suss it out. Jason Clarke has a subplot in the film that is rather quickly brought up at the start and does have some relevance at the end, but the whole execution of this subplot just comes across as cheesy and underdeveloped, especially in these dream sequence moments that try to explain more of the story. The film is very exposition heavy, and most of it is given to Jason and Helen, and being who they are, they do pull it off. But the supporting cast here really have a hard time trying to keep up, and they are very underutilized. Mad Max fans will be happy to know that Bruce Spence pops up in the film, although the gyro captain is barely used in this film. You've got awesome Aussie Angus Sampson showing up as well, and even though his accent does pop in every now and then, he gets some fun moments, but again, barely used. Helen and Jason are just on such another level when it comes to acting. It really is apples and oranges compared to the rest of the cast. The film is really well shot and has a lot of fun with its score, but I kind of just wish the film had been more focused on building up the mystery of the house and go off the urban legends that people have of the house in real life. And unfortunately, there really isn't much of an attempt to really blur the lines between reality and what's supernatural. So even though, as an Aussie in Vancouver, I love seeing my countrymen on the big screen, and seeing the Screen Australia logo pop up in another country is always a delight, it just ends up being very disappointing to have a horror film come out of the country that just doesn't really know what it wants to do, and ends up being a little bit boring as a result. Especially when you have young Aussie filmmakers like Ben Young smashing it out of the park with experimental horror films like Hounds of Love. That's one you should definitely check out. Again, if you have some interest in the house and the mystery behind it all, I'd say try out the film, but definitely wait for it to be on Netflix or video on demand. Winchester gets a 5 out of 10 from me. Guys, I hope you liked this review. Don't forget to stay right here for your monofix and more mono reviews. Bye guys.